Police officers of Reddit, what are you thinking when you see cases like George Floyd? For all the police officers here, what would the charges be if one of the bystanders pulled the police officer off of the poor guy? Wow, thanks for gold. I'm a former police officer, and so have had plenty of training in physical restraint of individuals being arrested. There is no police academy training officers to kneel on someone's neck to subdue them. That's how you kill a person. There is extensive training on how to avoid seriously injuring a person while restraining them, and I guarantee you every one of these officers was trained to never strike a person in the neck or choke them. The officer who killed him is very clearly liable for manslaughter at the very least, and I think the other officers who stood by have some accountability as well, because they knew damn well that was not how you handle a person, and should have stepped up. Not a local, I'm a Fed 5 years into the job. George Floyd was murdered, and it's fucking disgusting. We are trained that anything involving the neck is a no-go, and is considered deadly force. We were also trained that, if you make an arrest in a prone position, you search and then immediately move them onto their side or a seated position, because the risk of asphyxiation is so great. If a suspect says they can't breathe, believe them and take measures to correct to it. This training is reinforced at least twice a year in our use of force training. These officers deserve to spend the rest of their lives in prison. Retired after 28 years. Nothing less than murder. All the guys I worked with would never have considered doing something like that. You treat combative in custodies once they are secured as human beings. Nothing should be personal. Once they've been subdued, and you are safe as an officer, you stand him up, pat him down, and understand that your arrestee is at a low point in his life. Give him some dignity and you'll generally get his respect. It works 90+% of the time. That man was subdued and nobody should have been on him at that point. I'm a police officer in California. I'm absolutely disgusted by the officer's actions. When someone is in our custody, you must treat them properly. I don't care if they are arrested for murder or forgery. They are a human with a story and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I had tears streaming down my face watching the video of George Floyd. We swore to protect our communities and that's what we set out to do every day. Putting a knee into the neck of a handcuffed man for an extended period of time isn't protecting. A man has lost his life due to the gross negligence of an evil person. May he rest in peace. Cop here. Disgusted. There are 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't have happened. Simple, easy steps that should have been taken. Lessons that policing has learned over the past 200 years and basic things taught in every academy. Make no mistake, this was murder. Maybe not premeditated murder, but nonetheless murder. I will be angry if those officers do not get indicted. Didn't the same happen in New York a few years ago with Eric Garner being put in a chokehold? I was a cop in the military. In the police academy, this was one of the things that taught us not to do as it could crush the windpipe. The only time I was ever taught to use chokes and neck holds was in combat training for deployments. But when we got back, we always had to attend retraining classes to relearn what we can do stateside. Sheriff's deputy here, and I must say that I'm disgusted by the unnecessary loss of life. There are moments that make me regret what I do, and this is one of them. I've met my share of racists wearing a badge, and I'm ready for a career change. The oath we take is to uphold the law and constitution, so for the officers on scene there that could have stepped in and prevented this, fuck you. One bad apple always ruins the bunch. Unfortunately, I pray for the George's family, and that justice is served. Throw away for obvious reasons, and yes, I'm a white male. Edit. Wasn't expecting this to blow up as it has. I'm responding to you guys when I can, and I'm glad we can have a conversation about this. We do not unionize in my state for law enforcement, and I see many comments about systemic protection and abuse. I have never worked under a police union, but I have worked with people who were unionized, and I have heard my share of stories where law is protected by the union, Stories I hear are about union protection from bad leadership, but I can imagine those protections may extend further in cases such as this. As a son of a former police officer, my dad worked really hard to be an honest cop. His department was full of racists. They didn't like him because he was a decent cop. They couldn't do anything wrong on front of him. We saw the news together, and I saw him wipe a tear, but tried really hard to hide it. I know he's sad, and I don't want to push him to talk about it, but we both know things like this is always gonna happen, and that is a really sad fact. I can't possibly understand why a human being would do something like this. I work for a US federal bureau, but am not a local police officer. All 4 cops need to go to jail. Derek Chauvin, the cop with the knee on George's neck, should have gone to jail long ago. The guy apparently has a history of doing this. This is his 3rd time in 15 years. Black people need to keep fighting, and white/Asian/Latino people need to support them. Justice for cases like this won't come easy, and it won't come soon. But if they keep fighting, I truly believe that one day, eventually, it will come. I used to be a police officer. It was fucking embarrassing going out the day after something like this happened. One of the reason I quit was because I had no pride in my job anymore. For the people doubting if I used to be a cop or not, this is the only proof I really have. In order to get the police officer flair on /r/protect and serve, you need to send the mods a pic of your police issued ID. Haven't been to that sub since before I quit, but here it is. Retired. It disgusts me as the job is difficult enough as it is, working mostly in sensitive neighborhoods. Brutality like this makes it far more difficult. Serious question to the police officers participating in this discussion. Obviously there are a myriad of factors that possibly contributed to this incident, from poor training, to an officer being unfit for duty, etc. My question is, how is it possible that the 3 other officers on the scene took no steps to intervene, or at the very least, check on the status of the victim? Is there any reason for their lack of awareness or decision to stand aside while they, along with many other bystanders, can clearly see the man dying in front of them? What justification, if any, is possible in this situation? Disgusted, especially by the frequency of these events. Glad that I work in a place where we are trained for years before we ever put on a uniform that communication is our greatest tool. Sad to know that this is going to happen again and again. I have a degree in law enforcement and work in corrections in Minnesota. My thoughts are fuck that guy. Nobody is taught to put their knee on a guy's neck and leave it there until he passes out and dies. He may as well have had his hands around the man's neck. If I were to go off the video evidence, the officer should be arrested for murder. I'd put a serious tag if I were you. When I went through the academy in 1990, I had to complete 480 hours of basic mandate training. At that time, someone who wanted to be a hairstylist had to complete 2400 hours of training. That might be one of the issues as mentioned previously. My roommate's only been a cop for a few years, but he got into a huge rant about how that is not how you choke someone in a way to detain them. The cop should be tried in court for manslaughter at the very least, and if they think they can make a case for murder, go for it. I'm British but live in America. There is such a different mindset to policing back home in my experience, albeit I grew up in the countryside and lived in a quiet city. My friend is an officer today, and he was trained to use his words, not his weapons on first instinct. He said you are supposed to police by consent. It's police service, not force after all. I know Hot Fuzz is a comedy, but when Simon Pegg tells Nick Frost his most important tool is his logbook, it's so true. I never feared the police when we were out and about back home, probably because your average Bobby doesn't have a gun. In America, I'm not so sure I have that same confidence. Those that join the police to wield power and fear need to be rooted out. Those that stand by and say nothing of their colleagues who do wrong also need to be gone. Fucking horrified. Regardless of the act committed, you just don't opt that to people. I seriously question the culture on that team. Edit, since some people are being a bit dense. I'm from another continent. Yes, other countries exist. Yes, I have publicly declared my feelings for this incident on other social media, where my name actually shows. No, I won't do it on here, because if we have social media accounts without names on them, they must conform to our regulations, and therefore I have a place to express myself as a cop and a person at the same time. No, I don't care if you don't like that. Horrified. When you have someone in custody, you are responsible for their safety and well-being. I have to ask this as an infantry war veteran for the US. Why are police officers not held to the same standard as our troops? If I were to fire upon or kill an innocent bystander in a war zone, I would go to prison for murder. How is it that police officers do not suffer the same repercussions? It simply does not make sense. Murder by positional asphyxiation. My uncle is a retired police officer, and I called him about this. He said that it's horrible that people like this exist. It has a negative impact on both the police community and the black community. It stirs up animosity between the two, and they end up not trusting. What if a person in the African American community needs to call the police, but don't trust them/fear them? Not all police officers are like this. Many are great people, but the growing number of cases is alarming. Another problem is that, because of police unions, officers who should face serious repercussions aren't.